I don't even know what to say. Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back to Three River Books. I just finished Stephen King's It. And I don't even know what to say. So, the idea behind me reading this was because of the Halloween season. I promised that I was going to get this done by the 30th. It is now the 27th. So, yes, I did finish it by Halloween. This was my one crazy spooky book. It was recommended by all of you. So, thank you very much for that. I checked all my socials and this came up at the top. Also, The Shining and I think Pet Cemetery was up there pretty much as well. And again, I'll read those. The Eyes of the Dragon was the first book that I read from Stephen King. I was mostly into fantasy, so that's where I started. And again, growing up in the 80s, I kind of can relate to a lot of Stephen King stuff. He was on Creepshow and a whole bunch of other stuff. When Stephen King was coming up the ladder as far as an author, he also jumped into movies. And I got a lot of my exposure through Stephen King through television. Television isn't what it is today. Now you can just jump on the internet and get anything you want at any time. They were actually movie stations and movie channels that you had to go to, or HBO was in its infancy. So I kind of can relate to a lot of the things that were spoken about. Now, I know if you are a millennial or somebody that's young, you probably don't understand all the, let's say, misogynistic, racial epithets, the way that people spoke back then. All right. We weren't so uptight back in the 80s. That's the best way I could say it. You can call somebody whatever the hell you wanted, and it didn't have to be a race riot. It just was what it was. If you were a fat kid, we just called you a fat ass, and that was okay. Now you have to have counseling, all right? Totally different era. But when he wrote this, I guarantee he was definitely on a pile of coke. There is absolutely no way that any sane person or someone that was not under some type of influence would have wrote this book. So the way I'm going to attack this book is there will be spoilers, but I'll put them at the end. So if you're somebody that didn't read the book yet and didn't watch the movie, I'll put the spoilers at the end. Let's just talk about the way it is set up. So nobody does it better than Stephen King when it comes to small town. All right. So he has a bunch of 9 or 10-year-olds. These 9 or 10-year-olds are come from different types of families where some of them are abused, some of them are not well liked, some of them are over mothered. The typical sandlot type of boys and girls. All right, they all reside in Derry. Derry is from New England, Derry, or Maine, if you will. And these kids, six boys and one girl, they all come from different backgrounds. Some of them have an abusive background. I think the girl has an abusive father. One of the kids is really fat. Another kid is overly mothered. Another kid has a speech impediment, so he stutters a lot. So these are just like broken kids. This is normal for people in the 80s where we didn't have all this tech and all these drugs to fix people. We just dealt with it and we made up nicknames. All right. So this is how kids grew up back in the 80s. I'm a product of that. Well, being the unpopular kids in school, there was also bullies. And there was a crew of bullies that used to go around and terrorize these kids. These were the older kids, the kids that, drank, smoked, beat each other up, beat the younger kids up. So this small group of kids, the younger kids, create a group called the Losers Group. And they wind up playing in the Barrens. And the Barrens is like this desolate waterworks place filled with bamboo, and this is their sandlot, if you will. And what they do is they create bonds and friendships, and they smoke cigarettes, and they talk, and they make jokes about each other. And they really get super tight with each other. And that's the beginning of the story, where Stephen King is actually putting all these characters in front of you. And then, of course, he has the bullies, and the bullies attack these kids, and it just progressively gets worse. Now, he also goes into the book about Derry. Derry is a very, very, very old town. And there are a lot of weird supernatural things, a lot of weird murders, a lot of weird deaths that have been going on for thousands of years in Derry. Mike, one of the main protagonists, is is the only one black kid in the whole story where he stays in Derry and he becomes the librarian, and he's also the historian of the group, and he does a lot of narrating. So he's the one that finds out all this information. So when the book first starts out, Bill is sick in bed, and his younger brother George is the one that wants to go out and play. He wants to play in the rain, even though it's raining pretty bad. So they build this paper boat, and he's telling them how to do it. And when the boat goes down this certain sewer drain, he meets a clown. George, his younger brother, meets a clown, and the clown turns out to be a horrible entity, demon type person, and he winds up killing George. All right. So as the story progresses, every single one of the Losers Club has an interaction with it. They don't know what it is, but it does play on their fears. So whatever their fears are, some of them have a fear of werewolves, so it can turn into a werewolf. Another one is a bird, so it can turn into a bird. And this evil entity lives in Derry with a horrible history of young children dying in very weird and awful ways. Once the Losers Club gets together and they all join forces, they wind up taking on this it. Now, they don't really tell you in the book until the end on how they defeat it or how they fight it. But they all grow up. They take on this it person when they were 9 and 10 years old, and then they all move out of Derry with the exception of Mike. They all become successful in their own right. And one of the spoilers I'll give you is that none of them have children. They're all very, very successful in their own right. They still have their own demons as far as, family abuse. And, one guy that has his mom that has an overbearing mother winds up marrying the same type of person. So some of them have wives, some of them don't, some of them have abusive relationships, but they all come successful. And then here's where the story turns. It, or whatever it is, in 26, 27 years, has a recycle of killing young children. And they all made a pact before they left Derry that what they were going to do is if this happens again, they were going to come back and they were going to take on it and finally destroy it. And Mike, the librarian, the one that gives you the history, finally calls everybody up and starts calling them back. Mike calls them all back to Derry. And some of them have to actually go on the lam. They have to escape from their families, or they have to escape from their loved ones or spouses because they really don't understand what's going on or why they have to leave immediately. Some gave up jobs. Some gave up, husbands and wives, and they just jet. And they're like, no, I made a promise back 27 years ago, and I got to go back to Derry, and we got to take this thing on. But a lot of their old familiar habits, or a lot of what they had done while they were children, they forgot, or their brains just didn't work anymore. And this is where the supernatural kind of takes place. Like, until they're back in the town and start walking around and reminiscing, they don't remember anything. They just remember who they were from the time they left. And this is where that Stephen King kind of fog of storytelling kind of gets into place. So it's kind of cool. And then the clown, starts showing up. All right. So as soon as they're all back in Derry, Mike says, listen, you got to go out there and you got to reminisce and you got to go to these old locations and you got to get your memories back because we need to know how to defeat this thing. Right now, if you don't want to hear any spoilers, what I would do is I would turn this off. If you want to continue on going, thank you very much. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you want to read the book yourself, I'll put the link down below. It is a very excellent book. I would recommend it. But if you are worried about spoilers, just click it off now. I won't be upset. All right, guys. Now, thank you very much for sticking by. If you don't care about spoilers and you read this book already and just want to get my 2 cents worth, well, here we are. All the characters wind up having other situations happen to them. So the bullies come back from where they were, specifically one bully, and it is able to control the bad people. So it is a entity. He is a god. He only lives on people's fears, and because children have the most fears, he lives off that fear. Now that they are adults, they have less fear. However, in order for the Losers Club to defeat everybody, they have to control their fear and they have to go after it. Derry was built on a coal mine, it was built on a sewer system, and plans were lost, and people have no idea, but it basically lives in the sewer underground. So all of them decided they have to go underground to confront this thing and to kill it. As the story progresses, they finally start getting most of their memories back. It takes control of a lot of its people. It takes control of their spouses, takes control of the people that they left. A lot of the one wife and one husband that was left by the Losers Club comes over to Derry to try to find them. Like, what are you doing? And it takes them over and tries to use them or manipulate them to kill their own spouses. So it's pretty wild. It really cannot take a physical form, but it can use human beings and manipulate their minds. All right. And that's basically what Pennywise tries to do. Pennywise is just one picture of what this it can be. So they wind up going down to do battle. Now, this is the part that I don't like. You could have skipped straight to chapter 10. And in chapter 10, you could have started the book off if you wanted to. You start from 10, I think there's 27 pages, 27 chapters. This is over 1,000-page book. But if you really wanted to skip, you can go all the way to chapter 10 and start from there. They finally do get into the sewer system or are looking for it. And what happens there is Stephen King starts going back and forth with their child version of them and their adult version of them. And they are trying to remember which way to turn. They do reminisce. They do find different places that look familiar to them. And as they're walking through the sewer system or this underground labyrinth, Pennywise is trying to trick them and use their fears against them. So again, there's a monster, there's a werewolf, there's a spider that shows up that happens to be the final boss or the final beast. And there's one part in the book that I know everybody's going to talk about was the sex scene. Now I have to talk about it because it's just kind of disturbing, and I didn't really see where it helped. What the characters are doing is as a unit of 7 or 6, and you'll figure that out why there's only 6, they have to do this ritual. And this ritual is to bring them into this realm or this dimension where it resides. And they have to do this. And the only way that they can do that is to stick together and to feed off of each other in a good way where Pennywise is trying to pull them apart by fear. Now, this kind of makes sense to me. That part I get. There is a part in the book where you meet a turtle, and the turtle is part of the yin and yang of Pennywise. So the turtle is the one that is the good side of the multiverse, and then there is a it type creature, which is the negative side. So it's just, this is where it kind of gets bonkers. In order for them to defeat Pennywise, they can't just beat it on the level plane. They have to go into the multiverse. It's a unit of nothingness, and Bill, the main character, is the one that talks to the turtle, and the turtle kind of tells him how to kill Pennywise. All right, it's just completely bonkers. And in order to keep all these kids together, they all do certain things with each other to help each other out. Now, Beverly, or Bevy, is the only female protagonist in the whole book. She's the one that grew up kind of rough. Her dad beat her up. There might have been some sexual weirdness or creepiness that was going on there. And Bevy is a young girl. But when I say girl, I mean girl. These are only 9 and 10-year-olds. And for some reason, and I don't know why the editor didn't throw it out, but for some reason, the Stephen King wrote, in order to keep them together and to stop from freaking out, she offers up her body in the middle of a sewer. So she winds up having a train or a gangbang, if you will, with all the kids. So I don't understand this part of it. Now, again, I understand this is the 80s and there was probably a lot of drugs involved, but she offers up her body to all 6 of the remaining kids. I don't have a problem with that in the adult stage. I have a problem with that when they're 9 and 10 years old. Because I don't know where your brains were when you were 9 and 10 years old, but that was probably a little bit crossing the line. And again, I grew up in the 80s, so I know how things work. So that was a little bit much. And if you wanted to check it out, it's all over the internet. I'm sure that you can review it for yourself. Wasn't a big fan of that. There is a lot of sexual tension in there is a lot of sexual tension within the characters, and even there's a scene where there's a lot of homosexuality. There's even a scene with the bullies that have a little bit of homosexuality tendencies where penises come out and they start masturbating each other. Like, I don't understand where the horror of this book has to meet some weird sexual perversion. I just don't get it. That's the part I didn't like about the book. I know that this book has to do a lot with the Dark Tower. I know that there's a lot of references to the lights. There's a lot of references to the turtle, the Shining, and all these other the Talisman. There's a lot of historical references of there was a military base that was only made for black soldiers, and then it got burnt down. There's a lot of hate and discontent. Pennywise actually happens to be over thousands of years old, and he was flown in on a spaceship and crash landed. He crash landed and found his dugout under Derry. So it just bonkers kind of weird shit going on here. So here's what I would say. As far as this book goes, I think that if you can ignore the weird sexual nature of it and the trippiness of it, I think it's a good story. I don't even have a problem with it being from another dimension. That would be okay because Stephen King is the master of terror and horror, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I didn't appreciate the other parts. If you're still sticking around, I want to thank you very much. I really do appreciate all the likes and the subscribes. A lot of you guys watch me. I think I like 80%, 85% of you, but you're not subscribed. So if you can hit that subscribe button, I really appreciate it. I'm going to say that if you're into something a little bit weird, a little bit off the cuff, and again, I read it for Halloween season, I think you would not go wrong with this book. Just be advised that there are some weird sexual kind of perversions that go on. Also, a lot of bigotry and a lot of racial slurs. So if that's not your thing, to me, I didn't really care. I grew up in that era and it was not a big deal. But again, I know that we have a more sensitive generations now. So again, guys, thank you very much. I hope you appreciated that review. I will be reading more Stephen King books. If you want to get this, I'll put the links down below. If you want to support my channel, just become a Patreon member. It only costs you $1 a month and you get to watch videos just like this before anybody else. Thank you very much, guys. And as always, keep reading.